It really comes down to learning how you're persuading yourself. There's what I call inner propaganda going on inside our head. We convince ourselves of stuff. The reason why you're not losing weight is because you're convincing yourself of not to do the behaviors that if you were to do them, you would lose weight. The reason you're still in an unhappy relationship is because you're still telling yourself the story that's convincing you to stay in that unhappy relationship. Is a lot of people are, look at how happy and perfect I am. And all you got to do is A, B, and C. And that ain't me. I'm not, you know me. You're a very close friend of mine. You know.
I see you as neither happy nor perfect, but keep going.
Thank you. Instead of trying to move on from the past, we move forward, but we take the past and we take the pain and we take the difficult times and we use that to be able to help us to grow fully and be exactly who we're all supposed to be. So when I was 14 years old, I was very depressed, hated life. I was suicidal, and it got pretty close a number of times. I would write suicide notes to the various different people in my life. And I was going to explain to them, listen, I just can't deal with it. And at some point, my brain started to argue with what I was writing. It was the knowledge that I can't do this to them. Like, my parents saved my life. It's finally nice to have the most handsome guest that we've ever had on the Change Your Minds podcast.
Okay, delusional? Welcome everyone to the Changing Minds podcast. I am obviously not Owen Fitzpatrick. I'm the guest host for today because what we're going to do today, which is really exciting, is I'm actually going to interview Owen. You always hear him interviewing other people or him talking about, all of his great wisdom, but we're going to dive deep today and help you get to know Owen a little better. Really looking forward to the show. Owen, welcome to your show.
Thanks a lot, buddy. Appreciate it. It's finally nice to have the most handsome guest that we've ever had on the Change Your Minds podcast. So finally, it took a while, but finally we have a gorgeous specimen that has been interviewed. So great to be here.
Okay, delusional? Oh, and this is going to be really interesting. So interviewing you on your podcast. So diving right in, you were known, from a very early age. You started training in NLP, and for a while you were known as the NLP guy, but you do so much more than that today, and we'll dive in, but give me a sense, like how would you encapsulate today who you are and what you do for your clients and your audiences?
When I think about what I do, there's so many different facets, there's so many different types of clients, there's so many different people that I've worked with. I've worked with sports teams and Olympic athletes. I've worked with business leaders. I've worked with people in all walks of life from all different areas. And really, I suppose in a nutshell, what I'm trying to do is help them to run their brain better and help them to communicate and impact other people more effectively. And to me, that's a little different to what a lot of people think it is, because a lot of people immediately, when they think about running their brain better, it's just about, how do you be more positive, or how do you think in positive ways? And I didn't say make people happier. I said help people to learn to run their brain better. And there's lots of tools out there. There's NLP, obviously. There's CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy. There's Stoicism, right? There's a lot of insights we get about neuroscience that helps us. What I'm truly understanding as I spent my whole career studying the mind, the brain, people, communication, humans is, in a nutshell, it really comes down to learning how you're persuading yourself. Learning how there's what I call inner propaganda going on inside our head. We convince ourselves of stuff. The reason why you're not losing weight is because you're convincing yourself of not to do the behaviors that, strictly speaking, if you were to do them, more than likely you would lose weight. The reason you're still in an unhappy relationship is because you're still telling yourself the story that's convincing you to stay in that unhappy relationship. Or you're still telling yourself a story that's causing you to behave in such a way that's making that more of an unhappy relationship. The reason you're not succeeding in business is because the story that you're telling yourself, you're convincing yourself of the kind of actions that you're taking and justifying them and feeling like a victim, or feeling like whatever it is, a villain, feeling like you're your own worst enemy, feeling like you're not good enough. And as a result of all of that, you put yourself in a situation where you find yourself ruining your own life, preventing you from actually doing the kinds of things you want. The only reason I know it is because that's been my life, right? My brain does not function in a very happy, positive way all the time. I wasn't born going, oh, joyful and everything's happy. And I don't look at the world from completely rose-tinted spectacles. My attitude's great because I work really hard on it. And I sometimes feel that because I've been blessed with the, let's say, darkness, for want of a better expression, in my life, my capacity to handle that darkness has had to grow because I've had no other choice. And as a result of that, it means that I'm working out all the time. I'm working my brain out. I'm constantly fighting the battle, let's just say, that has made me strong mentally and has allowed me to find ways to make it what I am pretty happy most of the time. And I don't think that's a default state. And once again, I don't think everyone else is in the same situation. So for me, what I'm trying to do that I think is different to what a lot of people in the field that I'm in is a lot of people are, look at how happy and perfect I am. And all you got to do is A, B, and C. And that ain't me. I'm not, you know me. You're a very close friend of mine. You know.
I see you as neither happy nor perfect, but keep going.
Thank you. So once again, as a non-happy, you're right, non-perfect person, I believe that I can get through to people who, when they see these perfect specimens with six packs or the ideal and everything's perfect, I'm turning around going, look, I ain't doing all of that. I'm not trying to be this perfect specimen, but I am winning the war in my head. And not only am I doing that, I understand how we influence ourselves, and I understand how influence happens in an external world perspective. And I want to help more people to make more of an impact on themselves and other people, and to influence themselves better and influence other people. That's how I see myself.
What is, so I want to come back. You talked about the darkness, and I want to come back to that.
Thank you.
Because I think it'd be helpful to go back and, understand, where that came from. What's the end goal of all of it? Is the end goal to be happy? Is the end goal to achieve more? What's the end goal of all of this?
To me, the end goal is thriving in life. It's not just about happy, because to me, sometimes we have this notion about being happy that, the ultimate goal in life is to be happy. But happiness oftentimes is fleeting, and happiness only really, to me, is the inverse of sadness. And so you can't really be, I don't think, truly happy if you don't know what it's like to experience the opposite, which is sad. When you watch a movie, if you, for example, sit down and you watch something like Rudy or something like Rocky, one of these like gorgeous movies that are, gets you in the heart, part of the reason that you're so invested in Rocky is because of who he was and how much of a, inverted commas, bum he was, right? He had nothing going for him. Rudy was, again, an underdog, right? If you take some of the classic movies, the reason they're so impactful, the reason they make so many people tear up and cry, the reason they're so inspirational is because we write them off. This is someone who's experiencing the worst, the darkest, and it's their journey or their struggle to be able to get the light. So there's a lot of techniques out there to help people be happy. And if you ask me, do I think that people should work on their happiness? Absolutely. There's a lot of techniques out there to help people be more successful or to be more motivated. And should people be working on that? Absolutely. For me, what I'm looking at is not necessarily just success or happiness. It's so that you can work with your brain in such a way that you're growing, that you're improving, and that you feel better about your life. So it's not so much about feeling happy as if happy ever after exists. It's more about feeling better than you did last year, better than you did yesterday. And it's about continuously working on that so that you're always growing and you're always moving in the direction you want to go to. And also that you're able to have more of an influence on other people. So that as you go through your life, from the day you're born to the day you eventually pass on and die, that you're consistently and continuously doing something that doesn't give you a sense of ultimate, let's say, happiness, but you feel better than you did before, that you feel good about the direction that you're going in. That's kind of when I think of myself, what am I trying to help people to do? It's going in that direction.
So just to hammer that point home, what I'm hearing, and I have absolutely experienced this, is, so many of us think it's about achieving goals. And I'll be happy when I achieve a goal, and that's my goal. But you've probably seen, and I know I have, is I've achieved really big goals and felt like crap afterwards.
Yeah.
Because you realize, yeah, I've got this goal, but my life is no different than it was before. Like maybe, so what I loved about what you said is it's not about achieving something. I think you said it's about growing and improving every day. And I think that's such an important piece of it. It's that progress. It's not about the destination.
You know what it is as well? So I like to turn everything into something nerdy, right? And so from a neuroscience point of view, if we look at, ultimately speaking, there's two forms of happiness generally, right? Let's say three, right? From a neuroscience perspective. Let's say you've got some form of happiness that you get, let's say four. I keep adding on. You get some form of happiness from the people that are around you, the feeling of bond, the feeling of love, the feeling of connection, the feeling of empathy, being around your best buddies, being around your partner, being around your parents, being around your kids. The chemical that's most often connected with that or released is oxytocin. And that makes us feel really bonded and connected to people. Number two, you've got the chemicals of pleasure. These are the chemicals that when you are exercising or you're having sex or you're enjoying something absolutely delicious, you've got all of these sort of chemicals in your mind. Sometimes it's endorphins, which is more about masking pain than anything else, but endocannabinoids, which again is the high that you get whenever you've exercised. So you have these incredible chemicals that are going on that give you pleasure. Very short amount of times, but you get pleasure. Then you've got dopamine. And dopamine is the chemical that is driving us constantly towards what we want to achieve. So dopamine is the molecule of motivation. It's the molecule of more. It's about anticipation or reward. And then finally, you've got serotonin. And serotonin is more to do with contentment and confidence and security and feeling good about what you have. So I used to have a model of happiness where I would go, there's the Eastern philosophies and the Western philosophies. And the Eastern philosophies are, mindfulness, meditation, be here now, all that sort of stuff. The Western form is the more motivation, success, you can do it, build up what you want. And I always talked about the balance between the Eastern, which is more serotonin, being happy with what you have, and the dopamine, which is the drive of what you want to accomplish. And I do still believe to this date that that's what it's about. When I talk about winning the battle in our head, a large part of that is me being able to make it to the point where I feel good about where I am today. So that's the serotonin win. When I talk about success or drive or dopamine, that's about me influencing the world. And that's about the thing that the more I learn to influence the world and make more of an impact and do something there, I'm getting the dopamine. And then I give myself the pleasures every now and then, which gives me the endorphins or endocannabinoids. And then the relationships, which is known in all the research to be the most important part of what makes us ultimately happy or not. So for me, when I see those four areas, that's what I always look for, at least myself, to try to continuously work on. And to me, the more I'm able to take care of the way in which I think, which means being more of a critical thinker, learning to be wrong more, being aware of the traps that are all around us in society that try to get us to be pissed off about the world or in an out, in an in group where we identify with other people and we hate everybody else. And to me, this whole propaganda where we're convincing ourselves of all this stuff, and the world is convincing us with the culturalization and socialization and media and social media. What I want to do is help people to learn how it all works. Because it's been my life's focus. I've been doing this since I was, first time I read a book in this area was I was 13 years old, right? I'm now 46. So in 33 years, I've been dedicating my life to understand everything there is to know about how we influence ourselves and how we influence other people. And that's what I'm passionate about. So when I think about happiness, I see happiness as being important, but it's not the only thing. And I think so often we pursue happiness and we just think that's what it's all about. So therefore we point our fingers and criticize people because they're not doing what we think they should do in order to be happy. You work too hard. Well, maybe working too hard is the wrong thing to do. Maybe that's causing them to be stressed and burned out. But maybe the amount that they're working is good for them. And I think in this world, we're far too quick to immediately jump to, if you're not doing it my way, there's something wrong with you. And I feel that is true in the self-help world as well. If you do meditation and someone else doesn't, it can be easy for you to go, oh, you know what you need to do? You need to do meditation. And the fact that you're not doing it means that blah, 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 blah. And I want people to start to learn more about how their brain is working take responsibility for their own way of thinking and their beliefs, understand how they work, recognize that they're wrong a lot more than they think that they are, so that they can have the freedom to see the world in a different way and therefore make a positive difference. And that's what I'm working on myself every single day to do.
So I want to go back to the darkness you talked about earlier.
The dark side.
The dark. Yeah. Talk about that. What was that from a very early age? Was that teen years, 20? Talk about, like, when you say darkness, what do you mean and when? Just dive into that a little bit.
For me, so when I grew up, I've seen, the odd home video when I was a kid. And I talked to my parents and got to know what I was like as a child. And I would be, generally speaking, as a kid, I was very sort of, when I was a toddler and whatnot, I was very sort of bubbly. I was very friendly. I first said my first words when I was in I think we were in Switzerland for like a few months. My dad was on work over there and we lived over there for a while. And I was like, I don't know, 1.5, and I hadn't said any words. And I first started actually by singing. So I sang my first few words, and I was a bit delayed in terms of talking, actually, right? And so for me, when I think of myself as a child, I think generally speaking, as a child, I was pretty happy, but I was always very sensitive. And that was kind of my Achilles heel, because I was sensitive. I got hurt easily, but I also would be very cautious, and I would put myself in someone else's shoes. So if I was in school, for example, and kids were teasing me, not only would I feel hurt because they were teasing me, like very hurt, but I would also not be able to tease them back, because I would project myself into them and I would feel bad about what I could say to them because I didn't want them to be hurt. And that might make me sound like I'm a nice person, but actually I didn't. It was more of a selfish thing. It was just, for me, I just was like, I could feel other people's pain a lot easier. And what got me into therapy and psychology in the first place, what made me want to go down this track, was I struggled with my mental health. So when I was 14 years old, I was very depressed, hated life. I was suicidal. And I went through that for about, I'd say, 1.5 years, where most days I come home, I'd keep a diary. And in it, I would write down, generally what happened that day. And I would write down bad, very bad, good, very good. And, you might have one very good day in like 3-4 months. You would have the odd good day, a lot of bad days, and then a relatively large amount of very bad days.
And what were the bad days back then? And did it have to do with your sensitivity, or what did a bad day look like?
It was, look, I'm, generally speaking, I'm a socially awkward person. I've learned through the work that I do to become, when I'm on, to be quite slick. So when I'm presenting, I'm pretty confident and comfortable. I know what I'm doing. I've been in enough situations now that when I decide to, when I'm in a situation that I need to make a good impression, I'm able to do that because I know how to do it, and I'm able to tune in, and I've built my confidence, and I feel very comfortable that way. But naturally, I'm pretty socially awkward. And naturally, when you're sensitive and being socially awkward and you're in school, at least for me, and I'm sure it's even worse now with all the internet and stuff, it was, school was a nightmare for me. I hated it because, number one, I didn't particularly enjoy school itself. But number two, I wasn't great with regards to, I had a few friends for a while, but I was pretty alone most of the time. So from my own perspective, even though I had some friends here or there, I just very quickly became the kind of person that other people would, find it easy to bully, because fundamentally, if I really think about it, I was socially awkward. I did dress, I would be and this is part of my personality even to this day, I'd walk out and I wouldn't even know that my collar was up, or I'd just be oblivious to that. No matter what my parents would do, I would still just not be as aware of it. So I was an easy target. And I was such a deep feeling kid. Like I would go into, I'd be very philosophical, and I'd really feel that the word we used to use back then was reject. And that was the word that I was using for myself. It was like reject. And the whole goal in life back then when I was 14 was not to be a reject, because it was in a mixed school. And so there was girls there. And of course, you like some of the girls and you want to be popular in front of the girls. And so to be a reject in front of everyone. And because I was too sensitive to actually, respond back and slag back or tease back, it was tough. So I would, let's say, when I say bullying, I've been physically bullied where people, I had a kid put a knife to my throat before, and someone else or the same guy actually put a shoelace around my neck. But if you ask me what was the worst day of my life, the days that I remember that happening weren't even close. That was a little bit of fear, but honestly, that didn't even bother me. What bothered me was the stuff that people would say in front of everyone else, and me feeling alone, and I'm isolated and no one understands me. And to be honest with you, when I know this is all about the darkness, but whenever I go through that, when I look back at that and I think about how I felt back then, there's a beauty to it, because unless I experience that, I can't fully understand it. And if I can't fully understand it, I can't know what that's like. And to me, one of the gifts that the worst kind of moments can give to us is the gift of that experience, because it allows us to connect and understand other people that might be struggling in a way. And when I started doing therapy, it was one of my strongest points, is that when I talked to someone with depression, when I talked to someone who was suicidal, I was able to get through to them because I got it. Now, I didn't know how they felt, because they might be depressed or suicidal for very different reasons to me. They might have had, inverted commas, real problems, as opposed to me I was a teenager with hormones going all over the shop, and I was lonely and didn't have friends, right? Or didn't have many friends, if any. And for me, understanding that, there's a beautiful part, because it also, to a degree, makes you an underdog, and it makes you it's you against the world. Now, the problem with that is that when it's you against the world, you can easily turn around and just go, well, I can't deal with this anymore. And a couple of times I was going to check out.
How close did it get?
It got pretty close a number of times. A few times when I was at my lowest, I would scratch my wrist with a compass, and I would be trying to get the will, the courage, I suppose is the wrong word, but to be able to really go in. So I would do that a bit. Probably the closest I ever got was I was walking home from school, and it's a particular bad day. I know it was a Tuesday. That's the one thing I remember vividly. And I was walking home for lunch, and we would get half an hour for lunch, but I was relatively close to my house. So I'd walk home, and I remember just choked up and just feeling a lot. I remember one of the teachers, I think, said something like, clean your life up, you're a mess, because of something to do with work, right? So it was nothing to do with anything else. But I remember leaving there, and I'd been teased early that morning, and I was really upset. And I was walking across this big sort of street, this fast street outside our school, and there was this truck coming, and it was flying along, and I walked out, and I was about halfway across the road. There was no cars on the other side, and just when the truck was coming close, I stepped out. I just said, I got to do this. And I stepped out in front of the truck. And the truck slammed on the brakes and started screeching. And at the very last second, because it was too late for it to stop, at the very last second, I stepped out of the way. And I could feel the wind behind me. My hair stood up. And the guy stopped and almost caused an accident and turned around. I could hear him beeping and shouting. And I just ran. And I'm sure there's a few other students around the time. And I just ran home, and I was in bits. And I went inside, and I was just like, I can't deal with this. I can't deal with this. And then that night, I was writing. What I would used to do is I would write suicide notes to the various different people in my life. It wasn't that many people. It was like my parents, and sometimes I'd write down, okay, I need to make sure that this person knows it. And let's say the one friend I do have, I want them to know this. But the main notes were from my parents. And I don't know if it was that night or the following night, but it was definitely that week. I remember sitting down, writing the suicide note, going, look, you almost did it. You almost got free, because that's how I describe it. The next thing you need to do is just write your note so that your parents know it's nothing to do with them. Because even back then, very close to my parents. They're everything to me. And I didn't want them to be in any way. I mean, I knew they would be upset, but I didn't want them. So I started writing a letter. And so I started saying, dear, mom and dad, I'm sorry, but I'm going to have to write that. And I started writing the suicide letter. And I was going to explain to them, listen, I just can't deal with it. I don't know how to explain it. I'm sorry, but I have to do this. And at some point, I was writing down and I was like, I'm sorry that I'm letting you down, but I have to, something like, I have to do this. And my brain started to argue with what I was writing. So I found myself, it was like automatic writing. I wrote down, but I have to do this. And it was, but maybe I don't. And it was almost like I then started, I started having an argument with myself on the page. And I started arguing, but maybe this, maybe that. And the thing that got me was, as I was writing it and as I was starting to go back and forth, I started imagining my parents reading the suicide letter. And I remember thinking and visualizing my parents reading it and me dead, and them reading through the lines and seeing me give up on the page and seeing the thought process that I would have had before I ended it. And then me apologizing, I'm sorry I'm putting you through this. Well, if you're so sorry, then why are you doing it? And as I went through it, I started to realize that if I do this, if I end it, if I kill myself, then I'm destroying my parents' lives, like destroying it. And not to mention, my sister and anyone else. And that's what stopped me. That's what got me like the other side. I was like, you can't do this to them. It wasn't, you can't do this because life is worth living. It wasn't any of that bullshit. No positivity there. There wasn't like, hey, bright side of life. Everyone on the bright side of life. Nothing. It wasn't, the positive thinking or NLP or CBT or any of that sort of stuff. Because at the time, I knew a little bit of NLP. I didn't know that much, right? I just
at 14 you did?
At 14, I knew a little bit. I'd read a book or so. But still, to this day, it wasn't positivity. It was the knowledge that I can't do this to them. Like, my parents saved my life. Because from my point of view, in that moment, the love that they had for me and how much they loved me was the thing that stopped me from making the decision that I was going to make to ruin their life or destroy their life. And the fact that I couldn't do that to them was the thing that saved me. And it's weird because most stories like you talk about in terms of suicide is you reach your bottom edge and then you say enough is enough and then God intervenes, or enough is enough and then you say, oh, I gotta live, or enough is enough and then I'm gonna succeed, and you set yourself a goal. I didn't have a goal. My only goal was don't destroy your parents' life. And for me in that moment, the argument kept going, but my argument on the stay alive side kept going further and further and further. And I just wrote it, and it just became this almost like war. And when people say to me, you don't need to war, you just need to meditate and accept what is and accept what be. I get it, and that works for some people. And if that's you, go, great, good for you. Ain't true for me, and ain't true for a lot of people as well. Sometimes by seeing it as a war, by seeing it as a fight, you win it. And it doesn't mean you demonize the other side. It just means you battle. And in this world, I think we're so busy talking to how we have all these opinions on the world. What about the war that happens inside your head? How well are you doing with that one? Because if you're victimizing yourself, if you're betraying yourself as the ultimate worst piece of shit in the world, you ain't winning that war. So maybe before you start to talk about everything else, maybe you should focus on yourself. And so for me, I started to win that war. And it didn't mean the next day I was like, hey.
Well, that's what I was going to ask him about, because if it was no life is worth living, then you could see the success story. And then the next day I went out and I did this. But it was more, like you said, about not doing that to your parents, which in one way is beautiful. But another way, it's like, yeah, but the next day, do you still feel like did the suicidal thoughts go away after that because of that, or did you still struggle with it for a while?
It wasn't the suicidal thoughts went away. It was almost like you can't. You can't.
Yeah, I better fix this because I'm not ending my life.
I didn't have
I've
a
got
choice.
no other choice.
It was almost like it eliminated a choice for me. So from that moment on, it was like, okay, now here's what you got to do. You got to fucking work. And I saw a movie, I'll know the movie. I saw a movie within a very short space of time after that, which is the first time I ever saw it, was Rocky. And it was on I had a small black and white screen, a small black and white TV in my room right at the time. And I remember seeing the movie and I remember being transfixed. And there was a moment in the movie where Rocky turns to Adrian and I think he wakes up in the middle of the night or something. And he turns to her and he goes, this guy's the heavyweight champ. And he goes, I don't know if I can beat him. I don't think I can beat him, or something along those lines. And he goes, all I want to do is go the distance with Creed. No one's ever gone the distance with Creed. All I want to do is go the distance. And I remember watching that and just like the hairs on the back of my back of my neck just stood up. And I remember just being like hooked. And then when the fight happens, and I know you watch it back now with all the movies, and you're like, oh my goodness, whatever. I remember just watching it, and a train could have gone through my room and I would have kept watching it. I was stuck on it. And you see the fight and it's in the 14th round, right? And this guy's like, he's punching back and he's staying. And it's the 14th round and you see him getting knocked down. And Creed is like cheering and the whole audience is going crazy.
And Mickey's telling him, stay down.
Yeah. And then you just see him he's like getting up and you just see him get up. And I remember when that happened, I just burst into tears. I was like, that's it. It's because that's what happens. You get knocked down. And he had a quote back in like Rocky 6 many years ago where he goes, and it became a viral quote, very famous, where he goes, nothing's going to hit you as hard as life. But it ain't how hard you get hit. It's how hard you can get hit and get it back up and keep moving forward. And I remember when I watched that, I was in I still remember to this day. It was like 2006.
That I think was in the Rocky Balboa movie.
Yes, that was number 6. So number 5 was, but number 6. And I remember to this day, I was watching that movie, Rocky Balboa, and I was in Las Vegas, and I was with actually a couple of friends. And I remember that speech came on, and I like burst. I thank God it was dark. Right? Because it wasn't that like, it wasn't that much of it. It was an emotional movie, but not like this. I was literally like, it was like raining down my face. It was an allergy. Raining down my face because I was brought back to that time when once again, that movie had got me and sort of said, this is it. So part 1 was, you can't do this. That's what saved my life. And then part 2 was, your goal is not to be, inverted commas, happy. Your goal is not to, be super charismatic and successful. Your goal is to go the distance. And in doing so, that requires energy and that requires drive. And then for the next couple of years, I kind of became not violent, because I was never violent with people, but I would be like, I had a sort of a strength that wasn't always directed in the right way, but I was more angry with life.
This was in your teen years,
this
after
was still,
14
yeah,
you're talking about?
I was 15, 16, right? So I was more angry. And the anger actually helped, because when I was angry, I was actually like driven and determined to do something. Like some people have the metaphor that they've used where they say depression is anger turned inward. I don't think so. I don't feel that way, because when I think of anger turned inward, I think about self-hate. But depression, I never felt a sense of self-hate. I felt a sense of hopelessness and worthlessness and helplessness, but not hate. I didn't hate myself. I just thought I was a pathetic loser. I kind of felt sorry for myself. But I also felt like there was nothing I can do about it. There was a hopelessness there. Whereas to me, I then started to get determined. And when I started to get determined, I started studying and became obsessed with it. Started studying NLP a lot more, studied hypnosis, did a lot of hypnosis, became a qualified hypnotherapist when I was just before I turned 17, started working with clients very early on.
Now, were you in school, not the bullying or any of that, but from an intellectual standpoint, from an educational standpoint, to be doing that at 16, 17 years old, blows my mind. And you blow my mind today with the number of books you read and the memory you have for everything you read. When you were that young, were you super smart in school, or is that something that came later? Because to be doing what you're talking about at 16, 17 years old is pretty amazing.
Yeah, I wasn't super smart. Well, put it this way. I believe I'm smart, right? I have that belief about myself. I always have, even when I was whatever. I did well in school, but I was certainly not nowhere near top of the class. My sister was. My sister was the, top of the school pretty much. She got the best rates or some of the best scores you could ever get in what we call our leaving cert, which is a sort of secondary school unit, like college, I think it's called. Not college, in terms of high school.
High school.
Right. So she's just brilliant that way. But so in school, I was never that. And a lot of times, teachers would compare the two of us and I would always be found wanting. Honestly, that didn't even bother me because I always had this conviction that I was smart, right? I was always quite a deep thinker. When I came upon psychology and I came on the area that I was passionate about, that's when I started to do pretty well. So in my area, I'm obsessed with it. So I study, I read, I love it, I devour it. It's such a big part of my life, which is great.
So talk about, so in those early years, if it was 17, I think you've told me before, maybe you just said it, you got to the point where you actually had some celebrity and were curing phobias. And I don't know how many people know that about you, but talk a little bit about that. How did that happen and how did that impact you?
So, first of all, getting into hypnosis, the hypnosis school, was hard because they initially rejected me like a bunch of times because they said you're too young. And then I said to them, look, if I can get my parents to sign off to let me, do this therapy school, because you're talking about, I was 17 or 16 years old and I'm studying, like psychological problems. Right, you're talking about, because this was hypnoanalysis.
And by the way, did your parents know how close you were to ending it all?
No.
Yeah.
I hid it from everyone. But back in those days, even today, therapy is still there's still a bit of a stigma in Ireland of it. Not as much, thank God, as there was. But even then, I wouldn't have even, wanted to go to therapy because I was in my own world. I didn't see anything as the solution. I felt that the solution was, I didn't realize the problem was in my head. I believed the problem was in my school and the problem was in my life. And that was it. So when I started doing hypnosis, it was more about, okay, how do I get myself to the point where I feel confident and where I'm able to be more influential with other people? That's what drove me. It was like, I need to get out of this. So it wasn't like I need to get my head right. It was, I need to be able to get myself confident so I can be more socially, successful, and I can be more popular, because popularity was everything at that age.
But most people would say, I need to be, captain of the football team, or not like I'm going to go be popular by learning hypnosis.
Yeah, but I was never that good at most sports. I love sport and I was okay. I played decent at football for a period, but I wasn't particularly good. I wasn't particularly good at most sports. I was decent enough at tennis, I suppose, and snooker, which is like pool. I was always pretty good at that. But again, even if you take me at snooker or pool and you compare me to really talented people, I'm not there. Physically, my coordination is quite shit. So like, I always say to people, the problem with me and music-wise, in terms of dancing, for example, it's my rhythm is great, but I got no coordination. But of course, even if your rhythm is great, no one will ever know because you've got no coordination, right? So for me, there's an infinite array of ways that I'm not good. But the one thing that I kind of found very appealing was this notion of hypnosis. And so I started studying hypnosis and I became fascinated with it. And it also made me feel significant because no one else was studying it, certainly not at my age. So I started doing stage hypnosis shows. I had one time where there was I did a stage hypnosis show at someone's I think 14th birthday or something. And there was, I don't know, there must have been, and they thought it was all a joke. They thought hypnosis, oh, he's just going to pretend or whatever. But I'd been studying the stuff. So I went over and I was probably 15 at the time. And this is before I'd even qualified as a hypnotherapist. But I went over to this house and it was this house birthday party. They'd asked, could I do the hypnosis? So I was there. They brought the parish priest because they were worried about the hypnosis. Not a word of a lie. So I went and did this hypnosis thing. And I had like, I don't know, 12 of the kids that were there. And I was a kid as well, right? But I did the whole hypnosis thing just like I'd seen it done, just like I did it. And I remember this is when I twigged that I had something natural in it. So I remember I did this thing. They were all lined up and I did a number of different routines. And one of the routines was whenever you hear the sound of a phone ring, which I was going to call. Now, this was back in the old days. We didn't have mobile phones or whatever. So you'd have to use a different phone to call it. So whenever you hear that, the phone ring, you're immediately going to think the foot of the person next to you is a phone. So anyway, the phone rang by mistake when I wasn't ready and people were in the wrong position. So everyone dived on the under to get to the feet. And a couple of them got like kicks in the head. Anyway, 5-10 minutes later, one person starts to just, sort of go holding their head and they've got a bit of a headache. So my head, I'm now going, oh no, oh shit, what have I done? Because I'm playing with hypnosis, but I haven't studied it yet. I've studied it, but I haven't like qualified. So I'm like, on the outside, I'm like, just everything's good. So this person comes up and they start to go, oh, my head. Next thing, another 2 or 3 people, all of a sudden, and this is all suggestion, they see this person and they go, oh my goodness, I've got the headache as well. So they all think they do. Meanwhile, the priest is like, gearing up to do an exorcism or something probably. The mother is like losing it, going, whatever. I'm like calming everyone down. On the outside, I'm like calm. On the inside, I'm like, oh my goodness, have I just...
It's funny, you're this 15-year-old kid calming everybody
That's what
down.
I'm saying. But in my head, I wasn't calm. I was like losing it. So what I did was, and I still remember to this day, they had a screen door. Right, this was done sort of in a sort of a kitchen, sort of open room, and there was this screen door, and it was very dark, right, because this would have been around winter time, and it was raining just outside because I still just drizzling, right, not heavy rain, and I remember opening the screen door, I'd say, come out with me, and I brought them out one by one, closed the screen door so they could all just see me from behind, right. Left the other 3 or 4 people left in hypnosis, but the ones that had the headache, I got them out one by one. And what I would do is I would put my hand on their head and I would just say, I'm going to count from 10 to 1. Whenever I count to 1, your headache will be gone, gone, gone. So here I am, a 15-year-old, my back to the screen door, my hand is on their forehead. They're like this, and they're like making this shape. Everyone behind.
And is the priest out there like holding the Bible?
The priest and the mother are just looking out there, and they're nervous because they don't know what to do. And the only person that looks like he knows what to do is me. Do I know what to do? No, but I'm improvising. So I do this, and at the end of it, like the first guy goes, oh my God, it's cured. I feel amazing. He goes in. As a result of that, everyone else sees the suggestion, and I do the exact same for everyone else. Then I go back in, I finish the show, it all goes well, everyone's happy, except the mother and the priest are sort of like, quite wary and whatnot. But that immediately became something that then gave me an identity. I wasn't the normal guy. I wasn't the cool guy. I was the weird guy. But it's like magicians. When you're a magician or you're a hypnotist, you got this weird thing about you.
Weird is good. Not bullied in school weird, but
weird
yeah.
is good. And so I got that. I then qualified as a hypnotherapist. I started working with clients. When I went to college, I did some of the stage hypnosis shows, and this is in front of 400, 500, 600 people. And I was at that stage, the first time I did it, I was probably 17, maybe 18, but I was holding forth. This is before I'd, done a lot of training, and I was holding forth in front of 4 or 5, as I said, 600 people in a canteen where I'd be dealing with students. And again, I found it when I was on stage, I found I was quite good at, and I'd done debating. And initially, when I first did debating in school, I was a nightmare. I was, sweating everywhere and awkward, but I was good naturally at, I became good by working on it, but it was something that I found myself terrified to do, but I did it. And for me, the whole hypnosis journey became something where it gave me, as I said, an identity. Also, obviously, I came across NLP. I came across NLP when I was about, I think I read a first book on it when I was 14, but I actually became acquainted with Richard Bandler a few years later when I was still in my, mid-teens. And that was a profound experience because I remember sitting there watching Richard. He'd come over to Dublin for a one-day seminar with a couple of others. And I remember just being transfixed because I was laughing the whole time as he shared stories of how he worked with this schizophrenic and that schizophrenic. And that became a huge influence on me. And then I was lucky enough over the years to get to know him and work with Richard, and became a great mentor and friend of mine. But from that moment on, what kept driving me wasn't just this, I want to be the supercalifragilistic expert. It was ultimately from a desire of lacking. It was a desire. It was that darkness that drove me towards wanting to make more of an impact, make more of a difference in the world, and try to help people, quite frankly, that struggled like I struggled. And not just in terms of depression, but also even, confidence. There's far too many people out there. The thing that drives me demented is so many of the people that are super confident in the world are the ones that really have the worst ideas. And some of the people that, especially a lot of women in the corporate world, a lot of women in terms of they're so smart and so full of potential and talent, and yet they just don't have nearly as much confidence as they need. My partner is phenomenal at what she does. Her business is thriving because she's great, but she doubts herself way too much. And to me, it's one of the things I want to help more people to do. Is I want to help the people who don't believe in themselves but need to believe a little more. And honestly, sometimes I want the people who believe in themselves too much to believe themselves a little less.
Before we kind of wrap things up, you mentioned screenwriting. Talk a little bit about the movies and the acting, and you've won some awards, but talk a little, how does all that fit in with all this? It's very different than the business you run and the keynotes that you do and the clients you work with. So talk about that part of your life a little bit and how that fits in.
So I got interested in acting first in 2012 or 2013. A friend of mine, Paul Mussolides, suggested that I should go and, try some acting. So I did. And I went over and decided to spend a summer in New York, right? This is more than 10 years ago. And I went over for like all of August and studied in the Lee Strasberg School of Acting. Loved it. Did it the same thing again the following year. Did about a month and a half the following year. And then did the next 2 years. So I spent 4 summers studying sort of about a month each time, a month and a bit, studying acting and, going into that side. As I was doing that, I started getting into a bit of screenwriting. And if I loved acting, screenwriting was everything. Like, I loved it so much. I enjoyed screenwriting so much more than I even enjoyed acting. And it was the creation. You get to create your own worlds. And so what I started to do was I said, you know what? I'm doing okay in business. I've got friends that are contacts, that are really talented in their own space. I know some actors. I have a friend of mine, Paddy, who's a great director. He was already shooting some of my, work videos. I said, Paddy, how about we do a movie together? And Paddy, sure, sounds good. So I get Paddy, I get some actors, and I wrote the first script, proper short film script called The Brutal Truth. And it was about this guy who suddenly gets to hear what everyone's really thinking. He gets to hear everyone's inner voice. And he's in his, he's in his early 40s or late 30s or whatever. And he hears what his girlfriend really thinks. And he hears what his students, he's a lecturer, he hears what his students really think. And it's a sort of a cute little movie set in New York. We shot the whole thing in New York with the other kids in my acting school. And I like it. There's something cute about it, but now looking back, I'm like, rolling my eyes. But it won at a pretty decent short film festival in Cork, which is quite well known and respected. It's called the Skull Film Festival. It was selected by a very well-known filmmaker that selected the movie and, decided to give it the award. And that was a sort of a thing, like the very first film you do, it gets that. And then from then on, I had the bug. So I just started making lots of different short films. Some of them are dark comedies. Some of them are just dark. Some of them are just comedies. It's usually those two mixing around. But once again, the process of writing is the most fun part. And there's nothing quite like you know from writing books, right? But there's nothing quite like being in the middle of a script where you've got a real problem and you don't know how you're going to solve it, and you struggle with it, and it keeps you up at night, and you're going through your day and you're tackling this problem, and then after about a week, all of a sudden it comes to you. It's unbridled joy, and then you can't wait. I remember being out with friends, and I was like, halfway through the conversation, I'd be like, oh my God, I figured it out. And all I could think about was that. And as soon as I got to my phone, I'd be typing furiously into the phone. That's the kind of passion that I want to have more in my life. So for me, one of the things that the creative stuff has got, I've won a few awards since. I won New York Filmmaker of the Year. I won Comedy Award as well. I wrote a script with a friend of mine where we won at the Austin Comedy Festival Best Script, which is one of my favorite scripts we've ever written. And it was like this animated sort of comedy. But they're all small festivals. And there's a million people more talented than me. But I love the process. I work with my friend Mike on a few movies as well, who's shooting this at the moment. And I love the process. I love the creative process. And I love growing and improving at it. So for me, that's passionate. That's something that gets me going. And even in my work, the thing that buzzes me up, the thing that drives me, the thing that motivates me is creativity. I need to create. I need to do new things. And that's kind of why the lack of clarity is sometimes hard, because I'm constantly generating new ideas. I don't like to go over the same old patterns.
So what's the big, when you think about not the next month or two and what you're doing, but when you look out, let's say over the next 2 or 3 years, like what's the big, is there a big vision of what you want to create, or at least is there a project or two that you really want to work on? What's next?
There's a few. So there's, first of all, the books, right? There's the book I've been working on, behind the scenes in the area that I'm passionate about, which I'm working on. So that's one project. That's slower than I would like it to be, but it is what it is. A second one, which I haven't started on, but a dream would be to do a one-man show, to be able to write a 60-minute or 90-minute show that I would perform at some point, that incorporates some of the learnings, but does so in a story and brings people in and, brings people on the journey. That's something I would love to try and love to do. And I think I could do it. And that's another project that I would have. I'd still want to play around with different, maybe do a few more shorts. I'd love to do a feature one day, but primarily I think those two things, it would be the book and the one-man show would be two projects that I'd be quite passionate
And you want to talk a little bit about the book and what that's about?
The book is going to be around belief and around the way in which we convince ourselves of things and that kind of area, because that's what I'm passionate about. But I really want to make sure that when I'm writing that particular book, I've written, to date, this is my 10th book. It's technically, given what I've already finished but never released, it's probably my 12th book. But out of everything I've written, I'm happy with them. But there's not one book that I go, I gave everything to that. Like if I look at my TEDx talk, I can happily turn around, and if I died tomorrow and you say, what's one of the best things you ever created? It's that TEDx talk. I want to feel the same way about the book. And so I'm giving it more time than I've given any other book. I've spent more time thinking of it. I've spent more time working on it. And I'm not, going to get it done and finished until I'm 100% satisfied that it is a good representation. And at the end of the day, I'm not talking commercial success, because you never know. Like I've seen books that are doing really, really well and they're shite. Like the shite of the highest order. Like absolute empty.
And by the way, for those not from Ireland, that I think means shit.
Correct. Thank you for the
just
translation.
Thank you.
No. I appreciate the translation. But it's it. Yeah, and you know this yourself. There's an awful lot of books out there that are absolute rubbish. And again, I'm not even arguing that my books are particularly good. But what I'm saying is that when I read a book and it's incredible, right? And I'm talking, you could look at books by Robert Greene, and they're not for everybody, but they're brilliantly written. Like Robert Greene is a great writer. Adam Grant is a great writer, right? These are people that are great writers. Brené Brown has a very different style, but she's an excellent writer. Jonathan Haidt is a great writer. Like, these are great writers that are able to write great books. Malcolm Gladwell, another one. And once again, it's not that they're everyone's favorite writer, but I believe I have potential to write something that I'm going to look back on and go, I'm proud and I'm happy with it. And I don't have to sell 1 million copies, but I have to turn around and go, if I die tomorrow, this is a good representation of who I am. At the end of the day, sometimes I go, well, if you're dead, you don't even care because you'd be dead. But I do want to feel like when I leave this world, I'm leaving something, because that gives me a feeling of meaning. And that's really what I think. I don't think it's meaning. I think it's a feeling of meaning, because it's not that we actually find the meaning of life. It's that we feel meaning in that moment in life, and that we tell ourselves a story that we buy into. And so for me, the story I want to tell myself is that I left something for other people that helps them in the same way that I've been helped by the mentors in my life, from my parents to Dr. Richard Bandler, to my friends, to my partner, to all of the clients I've had, to all of the teachers I've had over the years, Robert McKee. There's loads of people that have had huge influences on my life. My training partner, Brian, who I work with for many years. There's a lot of people that I care about a lot. And that's the one thing about friendship, which also to me is important, is I believe that as we go through life, we're going to meet people and we're going to build friendship with different kinds of people. But whether or not we see them, whether or not people are still in our life, or whether or not we've moved away or drifted apart from people, I believe that fundamentally that while we might not always tell people that we appreciate them, that we care about them, that they're important to us, I believe that the moment of when you have friends and you make each other better in the moments that you spend time with them, I believe that's an incredible experience that most of us just take for granted. And I feel blessed, not just for the friends I have like yourself and Mike in my life today. I feel blessed about the friends that I've had in the past, and I always will root for them. Because fundamentally, I think that when you look at the stories you tell yourself about your life, about the people in your life, sometimes we act as if we're looking back into the past or we're reminiscing. And what I think is that we need to see that the person we are today is not the person we were 10 years ago. But instead of just going, I'm going to forget that person 10 years ago and I'm going to move on. When I think about the projects I have moving forward, the projects I have moving forward are because of the last 10, 15, 20, 30, 40, 50, 46 years. Our past can be invested into our future, and all the moments that we've had in the past with the people we've had it, they still matter. And just because life isn't the same as it was beforehand, I live in America now, I live in New York. You think that Ireland will ever be taken out of me? Ireland is my first, my last, my everything. Ireland is everything to me. So I'm Irish before I'm anything. I'm an American citizen. I'm proud to be an American citizen. But my history, my life, my story will always be as an Irishman. I'm very proud of that. And when I think about my future, I don't want to go, okay, I'm moving on now. What's next? I want to bring my history, my life, my culture. You will see in the future work I do, whether it's my book on beliefs or it's in my play or it's in a screenplay or whatever work I do in the future, you will see Ireland. You will see my parents. You will see Richard Bandler. You will see my friends. You will see my ups and downs. You'll see my heart, because that to me is beautiful art. That to me is the way in which we need to live our lives. Instead of trying to move on from the past, we move forward, but we take the past and we take the pain and we take the difficult times and we use that to be able to help us to grow fully and be more full expressions of humanity, of exactly who we're all supposed to be. And I don't think I really get this deep very often, but I just think it's important that sometimes when I think about the future, I'm not just thinking of the future, I'm also thinking of the past. And I think more of us need to do that, is that there's a beauty in the past. There's a beauty in pain. There's a beauty in the tough times we've got through because we've got through them. And as we look forward to the future, we have the answers we need. Our brains are prediction machines. They take from the past and they help us to try to survive and thrive in the future. And that's the way it works. And I have no clue what question you asked me, but sure, look.
I can't ask a question after all that. That's like, look, I think it's the perfect way to end this. And I want to end it just by saying how, we joke around a lot. We have so much fun, but I feel incredibly blessed to have you as one of my closest friends. And you talk about all the things you're doing and all the things you've done. I work really hard, but you're an inspiration because I look at you every time I think I'm working hard. I look at you and go, holy crap, I got a lot more to do. So I'm excited about what's next for you. I'm excited about you sharing the book with the world, the new book with the world when that comes out and everything else. And I'm excited to be a part of that along with you, just all the conversations we have and you inspire me to be thinking bigger and doing more things. And I want to thank you because I think you do the same for others. So from the darkness at 12, 13, 14 years old, if that's what drove you, thank God that's what drove you because of all the people you impact, and really looking forward to what's next. But
thank you very much, brother. It means a lot. And obviously feelings mutual on that side. I really, really appreciate you in my life. I'll also say that if I do get a New York Times bestseller, don't even try to talk to me. You're deleted from my life. No disrespect.
No,
but if I get New York Times, I don't even want to talk to you because you won't be at my level.
No, when you have to forget the people you meet on the way up.
Completely.
Because if you don't, they're just going to drag you back down.
Yeah.
And I don't want to be one of those guys.
Oh no, I hate it. I hate being around ordinary people. You know what I mean? It's just, I need to shower afterwards.
So I want to know one thing. So this is my first guest hosting gig.
Yeah.
Will I get more or is this my last one ever?
Let me just tell you, it was amazing. I'll just give you one piece of advice. Don't give up the day job.
Damn it.
You've got a face for radio. And you've got, you just need to get a bit more talent density and you'll be laughing. See the way I did that?
Oh, look, I'm trademarking that, by the way. So I may have to sue you now.
Well, you probably get more out of me than you did in this interview.
All right, I think we're done. This was awesome. Thanks, you.
Mike. Thanks, brother. Cheers.
Thank you very much. This has been the Changing Minds podcast with your guest host, Mike Goldman. Peace. What am I supposed to? Peace be with you. May the force be with you. Yeah. What are the geeky stuff Owen always says? Peace, love. May the force be with you. How's that? Good?